So our story begins in 2011. Simply put, back then, I didn't know how to be me. I came into the DPT program thinking I understood myself, that I clearly recognized my strengths and my weaknesses. I've always been a fairly introspective and introverted person, someone who is very sensitive to the needs and feelings of others. I actually prided myself on what I considered to be my high level of self-awareness. I expected this program to be like any other academic endeavor I'd undertaken up to this point, where I could get by on my above-average intellect, excellent writing skills, and a little bit of charm. I could not have been more wrong. During my first semester at Regis, I felt a little bit like a rock climber on a ledge without a safety harness. Standing at the base of the mountain looking at that course list is more than a little overwhelming. One of the main reasons that I came to Regis was because of hearing about being sorted by learning styles for our anatomy lab. It turns out that the Kolb Learning Style Inventory would be one of the most important documents in my career at Regis and the key to unlocking my success. I was so frustrated that first year, as I expressed in a journal from our first professional issues class. I started questioning my identity altogether, as the strengths I previously thought I possessed were failing me. I didn't really think it was going to matter that I was an accommodator, interestingly enough, the least prevalent learning style in my class. I couldn't understand why I continued to fail when I sought so much advice, tried to study and work the way that everyone else was. Ever so slowly, I started to realize that I was going to have to change my ways in order to succeed in this program. And in order to change, I was going to have to figure out how to be the me I needed to be. The remedial neuro lab exam was one of my first big victories. I studied so many different ways for that test. I had laminated pictures of brain slices hanging on the walls at home, which delighted my now fiancée, Amy. I even brought Amy to the lab with me so I could actually handle the brains while she was quizzing me, which delighted her even more. I was finally rewarded with a passing grade on that test. It was the first of several huge turning points for me. By the third semester, I was starting to show more concrete ways I was making positive changes, such as my crazy color-coded calendars that kept me on track. I was trying to proactively work on realizing the ways I didn't know myself. For example, I always thought I was so sensitive and knowledgeable about diversity, mainly because I'm a minority myself. However, I started to see that there was so much more to it than labels like black or white, straight or gay, Christian or agnostic. What really creates diversity is bringing together a multitude of life experiences. It's about being able to talk to an obese man with COPD at his rural home just as easily as I can talk to an elderly woman with dementia at an urban hospital. I had to acknowledge that there were subtopics in the areas of diversity that really could be weaknesses for me, such as homelessness, substance abuse, and military-related issues. Even with children, my former area of expertise, there were actually a lot of conditions that made me uncomfortable. My service learning experiences were at the forefront of challenging my preconceived notions of who I was and what I thought other people were. I was a gymnastics coach who worked with elite athletes. I didn't see exactly how that was going to translate into working with people with disabilities. I found out that being a physical therapist is being a coach, no matter the circumstances. My DPT 730 service learning experience was the Easter Seals Discovery Club, a day program intended to provide respite for caregivers of children with special needs during the summer. It showed me that I could love working with kids across the intellectual and physical spectrums. Even more than that, I could be good at it. Just like the similarities between kids, PTs, and coaches, kids are pretty much kids, no matter the circumstances. I signed up for that experience twice. By the end of the first year, I seemed to be headed in the right direction. A major part of that turnaround was, in fact, meeting my fiancé, Amy. Ever so slowly, I developed the personal and professional balance that allowed me to have a relationship in my life. Amy unwittingly and unfortunately aided my growth by developing nearly every condition we discussed in class shortly after we covered it. Not only was she a rock-solid support system for me during the most difficult times in graduate school, she also taught me far better than any book or article ever could about the intricacies of interacting with a patient with any kind of healthcare condition. I certainly wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for her love, and she is intensely interlinked with the rest of my story. By year 2, I felt like I knew who I was. By year 2, I was figuring out who I was as a graduate student and who I wanted to be as a physical therapist. But I was still struggling with implementing that knowledge in order to position myself for success. When given the time and opportunity to complete an assignment that suited my accommodator learning style, I demonstrated that I could excel. Earning an A on the CME for NM1 was a huge coup for me, akin to passing the neuroremediation exam. Still, more questions than answers loomed over me. How do I improve at utilizing other learning styles? How do I utilize my sensitivity to diversity to become a better teacher and leader? Of course, my struggle to answer these questions led to bigger challenges. Adding to the complications that year, Amy was diagnosed with an Arnold-Chiari malformation. As usual, her timing was perfect. The day after we went to the neurosurgeon, I read The Diving Bell and the Butterfly for a healthcare ethics project. If you haven't heard of the book or seen the movie, it is the autobiography of Jean-Dominique Bauby, who is the former editor-in-chief of the original Elle fashion magazine in France. And he suffered a massive stroke at the age of 43, which left him with a condition known as locked-in syndrome. Despite what I would have considered to be his body's insurmountable limitations, his mind was overflowing with lively potential. The book, in combination with Amy's diagnosis, made me question exactly what a quality life was and really examine what my role could be in optimizing movement to improve the human experience, as the APTA's vision statement puts it. For my DPT 773 learning experience, I had to tackle some areas with which I had the least experience in the diversity department. People who had limited interaction with or access to healthcare, usually associated with low education level or income, with many often preventable health conditions. Although I was not very comfortable with my role as an evaluator and an educator that day, the experience helped me become a better advocate for my patients in the future. Furthermore, I realized that I valued my role as a healthcare practitioner more than I needed to hold a grudge about clients with self-inflicted conditions, and my desire to make a difference in individual lives trumped my frustration with the system. By the beginning of my first CE2, I was starting to realize my abilities as an empathetic, hands-on practitioner, but I was still struggling to convey that to others. Essentially, I was still limited in my connection to my own learning style, let alone the styles of others. While I may have been angry with some of the failures of CE2, I still feel like I had a defining moment with my case report presentation for DPT 774. This was a case about which my instructor and I had disagreed on intellectual and emotional levels. My instructor wanted to discharge him from PT, or I should say this patient was a veteran with multiple sclerosis with no history of comorbidities. And my instructor wanted to discharge him from PT because she felt like he lacked the ability to make progress. I felt like I had the research and the patient's passionate heart on my side. Making my own distinction of what to do in that case at the very end of the clinical finally made me feel like I was developing as an autonomous practitioner. By year 3, I knew who I was, and I felt like I knew how to show myself in my best light. I could demonstrate the ability to excel not only in assignments that suited my accommodator learning style, but also the type that would ultimately get me my PT license, the dreaded multiple choice exam. My letter from passing the comp exam has been hanging on my fridge since the day I received it. Truly one of my proudest moments at Regis. Furthermore, I can share information in varieties of effective ways that help other healthcare practitioners better themselves, like my presentation for Children's Hospital that I did during my pediatric elective. During ClinEd 3, I learned that my unusual perspective and talents allow me to enjoy and excel in certain areas that other PTs tend to dislike. In Boulder Valley School District, therapists were being judged by the same criteria as teachers, including items like students' grades. PTs there fought to be evaluated autonomously and ultimately earned the right to create their own evaluation. I participated in a meeting with the other PTs from the district to design the Boulder Valley School District Effective Specialized Service Professional Standards for Physical Therapists. The other members of the committee remarked on how well I put ideas together in writing, and I realized I could use my joy and administrative skills to give me an edge in the future. I finally understood that my heart is what sets me apart. And I did, in fact, need to wear it on my sleeve in order for people to see and value the real me. That's what made me a great clinician, more than any A I ever got on any test, my ability to get people to relate to me. I was a little afraid, but I went into ClinEd 4 determined to be 100% me, and it certainly paid off. Contrary to the criticism I received in the past, my clinical instructor called clinical reasoning one of my strengths on my last CPI, which was the best culminating moment to my ClinEd experience that I could ask for. And I'm not going to stop there. I have so many ideas of where to go with my momentum from here. I'm very proud of the survey I created for my IPA, and I definitely want to continue to revise it and collect data on it in hopes of generating a new standardized outcome measure for pediatrics. I also know that I remain very interested in promoting the use of technology in physical therapy, and I hope to turn my in-service on technology for productivity into a recurring series that I can present at conferences and symposiums. Above all, I will promote respect for persons wherever I go. The climb has been tumultuous and unpredictable. There were steep inclines that seemed like they would never end, intermixed with crevices of respite. I gained 20 pounds and now have lost almost 40. I met and became engaged to an amazing woman who went from being diagnosed with fibromyalgia to having brain surgery. I was lost for a long while, but sure enough, I found myself again. And I can honestly say the view from the top is worth it all. Now I know exactly who I am and what I can do. I'm a 14er, and I can do anything.
Can we clap?